Hey guys, it's me. Today we're gonna do some more of that man's videos. Um, and today I'm gonna go over the Saturnalia Roman pagan festival ritual that they go into at this time of year during Christmas time. And he also it's in three different parts, three different videos. I've linked them all below. Um, and he has what do you call, I'm sorry. I'm getting, my heart is like, um he goes into, in the first video he goes over kind of like what they're looking for when they pick people for their cult. And then the second and third goes over, he covers four different rituals that are under the Saturnalia, and how each has like a means to an end. And they're all very different. The first one that they do was kind of one that they were trying to do with me. But let's go into his video now. And here we go.
Important subjects to discuss in today's broadcast, but we're going to start with the concept of teachers' pets because it applies to Vatican programming. I've known a few teachers' pets in my life, especially when I went to Catholic grade school. Now, from my experience, teachers' pets are not too smart. Who are not teachers' pets are kids who go to school and get good grades. They don't give the teacher a hard time. And when called upon, they know the right answer. I wouldn't call these people teachers' pets. When I was in school, teachers' pets were always repulsive kids. They were often fat, subnormal freaks in magnifying lens glasses who made a point to sit right next to the teacher's desk. And from what I remember, they weren't that smart. And they would often have trouble with the lessons. But to compensate for their low intelligence and basically bad personality, they would try to kiss the teacher's ass, often by being rats and telling on the other kids. So for all their ass kissing, the teacher's pet would go on to expect special treatment. However, a couple of the better teachers would see through their little act and view the teacher's pet as being fake and manipulative, and will let them know it, totally embarrassing them. Unfortunately, teachers' pets are exactly what the Vatican is looking for. Fat, subnormal, slightly stupid, and egotistical rats who expect special treatment for bootlicking. So many Vatican teachers see themselves in these little lard-ass cretins. And they do give them special treatment, so a bond is formed between bad teachers and teachers' pets. In a classroom of kids, when a bad teacher sees a teacher's pet, they know this is an ideal candidate for abuse and programming. From experience, the Vatican knows that due to a personality disorder, these type of kids would do anything for praise and special treatment. So they go looking for these types of kids who are easier to molest and groom without worry about the kids speaking out or telling anyone what is happening. So the Vatican sees teachers' pets as almost junior nuns and priests. And as a reward for tolerating the abuse without telling anyone, they get trustee positions and then go on to take part in operations targeting others. So the Vatican knows that teachers' pets will never go against the establishment or authority figure because it's their identity to be standard bootlicking slaves. So they grow up to be cult members, then often graduate to become nuns and priests. Moving along, these Vatican CIA teachers' pets are exactly who you hear about when you hear about the shock test. Now, the shock test involves three people: the bad teacher, the teacher's pet, and the victim. The teacher's pet would ask the victim questions, and if the victim answered the questions wrong, the teacher's pet would be told to shock the victim. The best teacher's pets would shock the victim for giving wrong answers until the victim began choking to death and even died, as long as the bad teacher continued to give the teacher's pet the command to shock the victim.
Yep.
So the bad teacher was, of course, the Vatican handler.
Mm-hmm.
The teacher's pet was the CIA, and the victim was you, the American people.
Yep.
And what that test does is to select the best CIA pets that the Vatican could recognize as their own. And I think it's 30% of the population who will shock the victim till death as long as the authority figure tells them to. And that's your current establishment, the 30%. If the Vatican does not like your answer, the CIA will shock you. If the Vatican does not like your reports, the CIA will shock you.
I know.
If the Vatican doesn't like your music, your artwork, your
Literally.
books, they and their cult of brain-damaged cattle will torture you to death. Nothing has changed over the years. So over these many generations, this network of the most cruel and easy to program was formed. And so the Vatican and their little cult begin to look exactly as they are. People who are being regressed back to a simian-like creature. The 30% not only resemble apes, but they develop mannerisms more similar to the animal kingdom than to man.
Yep. They were described
hunch
as
forward.
chimpanzees.
They waddle around in a sidestepping manner, like chimpanzees walking on two legs. They develop simian facial features and they begin to smell rank. They gawk at others, constantly staring and pushing people around, lacking communication skills. I've even seen them grunt or make facial expressions in the shape of words instead of actually speaking to others. So they develop this herd mentality where they always travel around in large groups, and it's hard for them to do anything independently. And therefore, they hate anyone independent or separate from them. So they are trained to torture and attack anyone who goes against the Vatican herd in a violent mind control ritual that goes back thousands of years, back even farther than the Roman cult of Saturnalia. Now, I will explain this Christmas ritual of Saturnalia in detail in a little while, but to quickly summarize it, the cult participates in mind control and torture of others. Often this involves rape, murder, and burning the victims.
Yep.
The worst of the cult take turns acting out in animalistic frenzies in these secret rituals while the others watch.
Yep.
And the cult doesn't sacrifice ape people to their alien gods. They mostly go after the strongest of humanity, people who they consider intelligent, beautiful, and moral human beings who become the perfect sacrifice to get tortured and executed. And these victims are often children and young people. So let's go into a review about the nature of religious groups, which are cults. In the center ring, you have what is called Godz, which most people know nothing about. Directly outside the center ring is the priest class, who work with these so-called gods and know everything that you, the general public, does not know. Directly outside the priest class is the secret societies, or the inner group of the cult. These are the people directly controlled by the priests, who go on to control who? The rest of you. The different congregations. The congregations are the regular people who go to Sunday school, quote biblical passages, and sing nursery rhymes. All these giant religions that you are a part of do not maintain such power and control just through your vacation Bible school teachings. There's a lot which is happening behind the scenes which you are kept ignorant of. The priest class keeps all the real information from you, the congregations, and they only indoctrinate their inner group, their cult of special people, about the cult's interaction with what they consider gods.
Yep.
And this is the cult's interaction with what are known as fallen angels, evil spirits, demons, or more accurately, aliens, which currently control this planet. So the Vatican-controlled governments and media has gone to every extreme to convince the rest of you that this is not happening and is only science fiction. That is why the U.S. government will never publicly admit the existence of alien or extraterrestrial life. And all the TV shows that you see about UFOs only exist to instill doubt or confusion about the subject. The media never explains any clear facts, and they only give you a Mickey Mouse children's documentary on some ancient ruins or cave drawings or something. These documentaries exist to cloud the issue and make skeptics of you all. In other words, they want you all to say, if that's the best they have on the issue, it isn't worth my time. Because that documentary on UFOs that I just saw was really stupid. If you want to know the truth, you need to watch the videos that I have on this channel and also the Bulletproof Cyrus 13 channel for specific details on the subject. But to quickly summarize, the Vatican and their militaries experiment with alien technology that they have discovered, which produces an energy field which links the humans to the extraterrestrial computer systems. This is all done with electromagnetic energy because the alien technology is extremely advanced. Instead of physical hardware, the aliens use electromagnetic implants which establish a link between them and the human's brain, the human's cranial nerves, and the human's nervous system. At that point, the aliens can set up a two-way communication between themselves and their target. They could transmit messages to the target. They could read the target's mind. They could manipulate the cranial nerves responsible for sight, smell, taste, balance, so they essentially roboticize the target. Now, priests and cult members historically have understood this reality to some degree, even though they call it witchcraft, magic, or power given by the spirits or gods, when after all, it's just alien technology or an intelligently guided energy system that exists to manipulate humanity. For keeping this all quiet, cult members are taught how to use this energy system to manipulate others as well. Since the technology is mass converted to energy, priests and cult members often state that it's spirits which are carrying out their wishes. If they want to get a target to go to a certain location, the priest or cult member go up to the target. They identify the target to the alien computer system by waving their hand at the target, for instance. Then they give the alien computer system a command to follow, such as they state, "Find me." And later on, due to alien manipulation, the target will find his or her way to the selected area as commanded by the priest or cult member. Cult members call this witchcraft or spells. They are also taught ways to hook their implant to other people's implants and then use their knowledge of the alien technology to manipulate others. But to call it witchcraft is a primitive way of looking at it. It's not magic. It's aliens manipulating people through the use of energy systems and infiltrating their minds. The priest or cult member can give many different commands, which ultimately become violent and manipulative and center around using the alien energy systems to either cause pain or sedation to influence the target to do unnatural acts by placing them under mind control. Priests and cult members are given a great deal of power over others. However, the cult regulates every aspect of the cult member's life in return. The cult controls where the cult members live, who the cult members marry, who they are friends with, what they do, and ultimately cult members aren't allowed to use their power for anything other than what the cult determines to be acceptable. So the cult is a hierarchy that stretches up from the militaries of the world to the inner cult, up to the Vatican priests, up to the aliens that control it all. So this Vatican military power establishment uses much of their influence to maintain control by 1. Covering all cult activity up and not talking about the alien agenda and the reality of using this extraterrestrial technology on others. 2. Pulling all the world's power structure into a single hierarchy of alien manipulation. And 3. Targeting individuals for recruitment or human sacrifice, which is still practiced all around the world and is at the core of every religious cult. Okay, I'm going to talk about what happens during some of these rituals. And since we just had Christmas, I'm going to talk about the cult of Saturnalia, which is a pagan Roman festival that historically took place December 17th to the 25th. This is what the Roman Catholic Church and their cult members truly celebrate during the Christmas season. The man known as Jesus Christ, or Emmanuel, who lived 2,000 years ago, was actually born in September sometime under the star sign of Virgo. That is why they say he was born of a virgin. Not because his mom was really a virgin. She got pregnant the same way every other woman gets pregnant. But to say Jesus was born to a virgin is the way the cult speaks in code to hide the truth from the rest of you.
I have to look into that. I don't know about that, but
the reason you all celebrate Christmas in December is because this is an ancient pagan ritual that goes back thousands of years. The cult of Saturnalia was recognized as a week of drunken lawlessness where no one could be punished for damaging property and injuring others. So you could get drunk, get in fights, trash people's houses, and it was all legal under Roman law. Hiding behind the scenes and directing all this chaos was the cult, having a field day as usual. So if you look up Saturnalia, the textbook definition is that the cult would elect someone to play the Lord of Misrule, and they would force this person to get drunk, take drugs, eat, and have sex with random people, and then at the end of the festival they'll kill him, and this represented that they were killing someone evil and destroying the forces of darkness. And since that is not really how it works, I will explain it more accurately now. Once again, Saturnalia involved multitudes of priests and cult members who would use this alien technology, or witchcraft as they understood it, to manipulate random targets throughout the community. So to fully explain how these rituals always differed slightly based on who was being targeted, I'm going to give you 4 examples in the form of stories so that you begin to understand these mind control rituals or games of manipulation that the cult plays on others. The first ritual, Scarlet. Scarlet is a beautiful girl who works as a waitress in a tavern. She got certain cult members' attention when they went there to eat and saw this lovely girl radiating with happiness and life. When she walked over to take their order, they spoke to her and found that she was intelligent and friendly. They asked her some questions and found that she was engaged to a young man who worked as a ship builder. The cult went and sniffed him out and found that he was also a very nice person. So the cult needed to disgrace this seemingly perfect match made in heaven because it made them very jealous. And they wanted Scarlet under their control because Scarlet had a charm that they could potentially use to manipulate others. So the cult went to work devising a plan to get her inside the cult. So they found 2 young cult members, a man and a woman around Scarlet's age, and they told these 2 cult members to pretend to be husband and wife and go into the tavern where Scarlet worked and begin to strike up conversations with Scarlet. The false couple should act like they couldn't be happier and in love. They should tell Scarlet their cover story of where they worked and lived and to tip her generously. After a couple months of going to the tavern where Scarlet worked and getting to know her as regulars, they waited until the holiday festival of Saturnalia to act. During the month of December, many cult members had visited the tavern, all putting a spell on Scarlet as they were trained to do. Then the false couple entered as planned, and saw that Scarlet looked sedated with this energy. Scarlet had been feeling strangely good this last week, as though she were always drunk, even though she never drank. Tonight, the couple mentioned that they were having a party at their extravagant house that overlooked the ocean. They told Scarlet many important people in the community will be there, some who might be able to give her better employment opportunities if she were to meet them. So Scarlet said that she was supposed to meet her fiancé after work, but the fake couple maintained that it wouldn't hurt if she only dropped by for a little while just to see their lovely estate. They said it would be their honor to send a carriage for her after work so she wouldn't have to walk all the way there and back and wouldn't be too late in meeting her fiancé. And Scarlet decided that it would be wise to accept their offer because they appeared to have such connections. When she arrived at the large estate that overlooked the water, she felt intoxicated. She went in and was offered a drink and was surrounded by many people, all who seemed eager to make her acquaintance. As the night went on, she was introduced to a young man who was not only available, but also a wealthy noble. The hours wore on, and they danced several times, and the more she drank, the more attracted she grew to this man, and soon she forgot about her fiancé. Before she knew it, she was in another stagecoach, and then at the noble's estate. After she slept with the man, she began to feel even more strangely excited. She was given an expensive dress, and then escorted by the noble to another, crazier party where she engaged in more sex acts with several different people who offered her money and connections. What she failed to see was that this was all set up by the cult. The couple who invited her out were not married and didn't even know each other before the operation concerning Scarlet commenced. That was not their beautiful house by the ocean, and the noble Scarlet met at the party was just another cult member as well. He was actually a soldier who was paid to pretend he was a noble and also given a fancy estate just for the night. So it goes on that her fiancé finds out what has happened, their relationship fails, and after some more sex parties, Scarlet finds that she is nothing more than a prostitute barmaid who is occasionally used by the cult to seduce young men the same way she was once seduced. The love fades from her eyes, the life fades from her soul, and soon she is like the glaring old hags that walk around with an evil glint in their eyes and a hideous smile on their faces. The second ritual, Petros. Petros had charisma. He was a short little stout man with a walrus-like mustache who always looked great in a top hat. He came from an influential family of merchants, and when Petros got dressed up and attended friends' parties, he liked to drink excessively and then go around and meet everyone there. Everyone liked Petros, who was a great conversationalist and never ran out of things to say. When the cult got a load of Petros, they said, "This is the type of man we need on our side. All the citizens like Petros, and he is easy to trust." So once again, the cult gathered in a herd, and all took turns meeting Petros, who enjoyed talking to everyone. They all shook his hand and made sure the Greys knew that Petros was the next target of the cult to pull him into their flock. If Petros turned out to be easy to control, he had city mayor written all over him. So during Saturnalia, the cult made it a game to take Petros on a walk. They found it was extremely easy to trigger him to walk over to any cult member and start talking. They got him to drink too much and then found he was even easier to manipulate. The cult found that they could subliminally command him to go to every location they had in mind, and sooner or later Petros would show up shaking everyone's hands. Every one of the cult spells worked on Petros, and Petros had no idea he was being manipulated. When he got drunk and began to say things out loud that cult members would whisper in his ear, they knew they had their man. So So Petros was introduced to cult members who went on to be his handlers, and soon he was given an opportunity to run for city mayor. Of course he was elected, and still to this day, doors open all over the city for Petros the Great. The third ritual, Tony. Tony worked down at the docks, unloading cargo from ships, so he was a big muscle-bound knucklehead. He was known to get into fights, sometimes arranged street fights, and he was feared in the city. The cult hit him with energy the whole month of December, and then during the ritual of Saturnalia, they wanted to see how far into senselessness and depraved violence he would sink. The cult messed with him until Tony was blind with rage, and the more he drank, the more violent he became. During Saturnalia, the cult triggered him to go check on his girlfriend, and at her house they got into an argument and he beat her up. Then he stormed down the street, beating up random drunks in the alleys. After visiting a bar, he was triggered by the cult to follow a woman home, break into her house, and then rape her. Then the cult suggested he beat a sleeping homeless man to death. While all this was happening, the cult stood in the background, following Tony through the city and ritually controlling him to act in worse and worse ways. Eventually, they knew this was the type of ape man they could use as a serial killer to scare everyone else and to act as the cult's muscle. Using their power, they led him out into the woods where many people lurked, including some children who stumbled over to him. In his mind-controlled and demon-possessed rage, he tortured and then killed the defenseless children as groups of others watched in the background behind masks. When he went to attack these strangers in masks, he was brought to his knees as a pain shot through his chest, as though his heart were going to explode. His throat tightened up to the point that he couldn't breathe, and two men behind masks walked up to him laughing and saying, "See what we can do to you?" The fourth ritual.
Okay, next
Matthew.
video.
Matthew was always serious for a younger guy in his mid-30s. He never liked the festival of Saturnalia because it always brought out the worst in people. They got loud, blasted music, and made asses out of themselves in public places. Outside of the city, he had a small workshop where he worked as a carpenter who built furniture. He caught the cult's eye because he was a big, good-looking guy, well over 6 feet tall and 200 pounds. He was married to a good woman, and they had 2 young children. When he got out of work and traveled back home, the streets were packed with people. Since his mother-in-law had been sick this past week, his wife had taken the 2 children to stay with her, to help care for her until she got better. So Matthew decided to stop by the tavern to pick up something to eat for dinner. The cult had been hitting Matthew for months now. He had caught a priest's eye who had informed the others that he wanted Matthew in the cult. The only trouble was that Matthew was a family man who liked to keep to himself. He was a hard worker who worked for most of the day, and after work returned home where he spent all his free time at his house with his wife and children. He never went out drinking or to parties or street festivals or gladiator events. For weeks, the cult had attempted to trigger Matthew to notice them or talk to them, but he always kept to himself. He wasn't the type of man to wander the streets looking for something to do or strike up conversations with strangers. He had a job to do and a family to support, and that was his life. After work, the cult followed Matthew into a nearby restaurant where he ordered his dinner and waited for them to prepare it. In the tavern, a strange man stood nearby with these crazy eyes, staring at Matthew rudely. This irritated Matthew, more so recently, as it seemed that wherever he went, these strange people would always be around, staring at him.
Always around.
He never noticed this before because people, for the most part, minded their business, but lately, he had been attracting the strange attention. The man staring obscenely was an older guy in his late 60s, and seemed to be beckoning Matt over to him by motioning with his hand, all the while with this insane smile on his face. Matthew grew tense and slightly angry when all of a sudden he noticed the old man's boots. The man had an interesting pair of work boots on, and Matthew had needed a new pair for months now. Suddenly he felt the impulse to ask the man where he got his boots and open his mouth to talk, but changed his mind at the last second when he saw the expression on the old man's face change to pure excitement. Matt recoiled in disgust, and then the counter person was calling to Matthew, saying that his food was ready to go. Once at home, Matthew felt uncomfortable. He felt like he was coming down with a sickness, and now he felt nervous. He kept pacing around the house and noticed there was a lot of traffic outside. Every few minutes, a stagecoach would race past. He had no idea where this traffic was coming to or going. He decided to call it a night and lay down, but woke up throughout the night with panic attacks. The next day, he felt even worse. Early the next morning, he got on his horse and rode down to his workshop. All through the day, strange people would enter his shop. They would either ask him stupid questions, appearing as though they were just wasting time, or they would pretend to look around the shop. But when Matthew looked up from his work, they were always staring at him. The people all seemed strange. Some would glare with evil, dead eyes, while others seemed as though they were intoxicated or on drugs. They gave him bad feelings.
Always.
He noticed this when the shop emptied out, and it wasn't that bad. But then another group would enter, and he'd begin to feel unhappy or agitated again.
Always.
For the first time in his life, he felt clumsy, and his eyes began to drift out of focus. After cutting the wrong size wood for the third time that day, Matthew thought, I must be coming down with something. I can't get anything right today. The door swung open, and in walked another group of subnormal people with crossed eyes. They hunched around the store, waddling around and staring at him strangely. He never saw so much traffic in the store ever. This was strange even for the festival. Finally, at the end of the day, an old man entered and wanted a table built and delivered to his estate as soon as possible. The old man said his table had broke and he needed a new one quickly for a party that was taking place at his home. The old man said he had paid double if Matthew could build it quickly and then deliver it to his house by the next night. That night, Matthew stayed late, working on the table. All night long, traffic passed by his store. He tried to ignore the strange people who gave him bad feelings as they dragged their feet past his store, gawking through his windows with frog-like eyes. That night, he decided to stay at his workshop and lay a blanket on the floor when he got tired, but panic drove him up as soon as he lay down. It was as if he couldn't breathe. He decided to busy himself with work on the table again, and early the next morning he tried to go to sleep again, drifted off to sleep for a moment, but then was jerked awake with a start. He finished the table by that evening and then began to load it on his cart. He journeyed to the old man's house, following directions the old man had given him to a remote section of the countryside. He arrived at the old man's house, close to dark, and with the old man's servant, carried the table inside. The old man kept him there, asking him questions and raving about how good the table looked. Matthew smiled, answered the questions, and then politely told the old man that he had to get on the road soon before it got too dark. The old man paid him, and then Matthew left. A mile or two down the road, his wagon wheel broke, and Matthew injured his leg falling off the wagon. Upon examination, it looked like someone had purposely sawed the wheel. When he unlatched the horse from the wagon, the horse broke into a frenzy and bolted away. As Matthew walked away, his heart began to race. He could feel his pulse racing, and a pain began in the center of his back. He tried to keep his wits about him as he stumbled along the dark road, occasionally calling out to his horse. After a ways, he heard a wagon approaching from the distance. As it pulled along beside him, he saw that it was the old man's servant, smiling horrifically while holding up a lantern. Matthew was close to panicking now.
So tired
He
of these
felt
people.
on the edge of a heart attack, and when the servant pulled up, it only got worse. The servant appeared to be enjoying all this as he began to laugh, saying, "If you come with me, I'll make the pain go away. Stay away from me," Matthew managed to say as he trudged along, breathing deep and trying to keep his composure. "If you don't come with us, you will die," the servant maintained, but Matthew walked along, ignoring the man and realizing that all these strange people that he'd come in contact with recently were trying to kill him. Based on how they looked, he knew they were evil, and his only chance was to make it home on his own. Eventually, the servant pulled on ahead, and Matthew was alone in the dark. The panic grew worse and worse, and something seemed to be pulling Matthew back and beckoning him to turn around and walk back to the house of the old man. A little voice began to try to convince him that the old man had been nice, had paid him more than he usually got for a table, and the old man hadn't really looked as bad as the others. The pain grew worse, and the panic grew worse, but Matthew pushed on, fighting the pain and the fear with everything he had in his soul. By morning, he had made it back to his village, and at home he managed to fall asleep for some time, exhausted from all the work and walking he'd done. When he got up, he felt slightly better than he had the night before, yet he was still anxious. Without his horse, he walked to his workshop the next day for more of the same. Strange, almost deformed people would walk past his shop or enter, wasting time and stumbling around almost in a daze as though they were sleepwalking. Matthew tried his best to ignore them and focus on his work, even though they made him uncomfortable and sometimes angry. Meanwhile, in the cult, a meeting took place. Higher-ranking priests and cult members agreed that Matthew was stronger and tougher than they expected. They decided if they couldn't get him into the cult, then they had to kill him, so they devised new plans for the ritualistic killing of Matthew. If Matthew was strong enough to resist their magic, they should try to hurt him in other ways. They went through their list of methods. They could hurt him financially by destroying his business. They could harass and attempt to control those who he loved. They could poison his food or drinking water. The cult of apes gathered together as a rank smell of animals filled the air. They had a lot of work to do. So, thousands of years have passed, but it's the same old Vatican cult garbage today. And unfortunately, this is your current United States government now. This is the establishment. The Vatican and the military like primitive people the best, who follow orders and never question authority, even as it degrades itself into a subhuman state and everything is failing around them.
Okay, so that was all three of the videos. Yes, and we had a guest star liking the video, thinking it was funny, and we Shazia Asif, Shazeka Asif. Okay, I don't know who you are. And we have no friends in common. So I have to assume that you're probably from the trafficking network. So welcome. You know, now we have your. That was not smart of you to hit like. Yes. So, anyway, yeah, it never ends. I'm telling you. Well, I think he wrote those stories, but they were good examples of like the different techniques, but nothing has changed at all. And when they decide that you're too strong, then they start to do like devise crazier things. I've been doing this since 2008, but I can look even back further and see that there had been targeting and things happening. I just didn't know what it was back then. and they will do all kinds of crazy things to try to get you into their system or cult or whatever it is. Um, yeah, so like dox all your information to international criminals and, you know, like sell your firstborn to Satan before you even have it, all kinds of stuff. So, all right, guys. Well, thank you for showing up, and I will talk to you later. Bye.